All right, awesome. Yeah, thank you for having me on.
Thanks for coming on. Yeah. Are you live
Yeah.
too?
No, I'm just recording offline on a OBS. Um, yeah, just for a quick little intro. I think this will be a pretty fun conversation. To introduce myself, you can call me Jolah. My YouTube channel name is Jolah Talks Politics. I take live callers on YouTube Shorts using an actual phone number. So I have tons of conversations with amazing, fantastic, the best ever voters, the normie voters. As for my background, I'm from a 95% white coal town in rural Pennsylvania. So I heard a lot of crazy, crazy stuff growing up. I had mindsets I really had to, grind and work myself out of, have that true grind set. I mean, right now, most commentators and consultants are from the DC area, Massachusetts, New York, or California. So I try my best to make my content, um, in a way that can address possible blind spots for anyone that might be from those areas. I do think there is some nuance you get living around a lot of these epicenters of MAGA that you do not get coming from those particular areas. I've worked in organizing, volunteering, and policy. I do have my master's in public policy, so I try to speak from experience when I can. The master's does not mean that much at all. I only bring that up so everyone knows I'm super duper extra qualified. So yeah, I wanted to chat with Hutch because someone actually called into my show a couple days ago talking about Hutch being obsessed with hating lefties and approaching them in the wrong way. So when I called you genuinely idiotic on Twitter, it was actually like when a middle schooler tries to flirt and they say something mean to get someone's attention. And I'm very awkward, so that was me saying I like you, but I don't know how to express my emotions yet. So we're gonna get there. What I meant to say was, your messaging on progressives, it may be ineffective at times and might even be helping anti-democratic far leftists like Hassan, for example, recruit more people to his side. And I have different critiques for leftists, obviously, who reach out to moderate voters and liberals that reach out to progressives. And my main focus is like messaging and how we can frame issues to have the best impact and how we talk about these different things for different groups. So I want to talk about messaging, Democratic campaigns, and also the big question, the huge question in liberal circles: was Bernie Sanders unfairly treated in the 2016 and 2020 Democratic primaries? But to start off, obviously I've seen you on Live and Learn, and I've seen a couple of your streams. But to frame the conversation, right now, I've seen you say a couple different things about like doubling down on patriotism. You talk about populism. And I thought about you being like old man Hutch on the porch, seeing all their kids with their fancy new smartphones, and you're like, those are not good for you. Those smartphones are not good. And you're right, you're not wrong. But in 2025, we might need to use smartphones a little bit, just like populism might need to be used a little bit. So in that framing, right now, where do you think we need to go?
When you say we, like, what do you mean? Like the party or just like the left wing movement broadly? Or
Yeah, pretty much any effective Democrat that can work electorally and through organizing against Trump fascism.
um, well, I think like the thing that we've really focused on a lot on the pod at least has been the gap that the Democrats left in alternative media spaces in 2024.
Hmm.
I think apart from any kind of like policy discussions about what platform Kamala should have run on, I actually don't think that was the main reason why she lost. I think it was just because Republicans are they capitalized on a couple different things really effectively. They capitalized on inflation really effectively, even though the things that they were saying I think were broadly untrue in terms of how much they were blaming the Biden administration for a global economic phenomenon that was happening. They were very effective at getting their message out there and swaying people into believing that Biden was the cause of higher gas prices and higher grocery prices. They also capitalized on a vulnerability that I think Biden left for himself when he, I think, ignored a very real problem at the border. And I'm sure we can get into that. But they mobilized so well on alternative media, both Trump himself in terms of taking the media space seriously and showing up on Theo Vaughn and showing up on Joe Rogan and showing up on Flagrant. I mean, these things I think made a huge difference. And so, like, if I were to focus on one thing right now for Democratic Party strategy moving forward, is they have to be so much more present in those spaces. And then of course, like I think we can get into like policy discussions about like what the nominee should run on in 2028 and what House Democrats and Senate Democrats should run on in 2026. And maybe we can find some agreement and disagreement there. But I would start there. I would start by taking that space seriously.
Okay, yeah, I definitely agree 100% with the different media environments. And I'm gonna get into that a little bit when we talk about the Bernie primaries later and the reaction to Bernie going on Joe Rogan, which I'm sure. Just really quick, um, do you remember like the big reaction to Bernie going on Joe Rogan, and were you like against that at the time?
I saw the reaction. I thought it was silly, and I supported him going on Bernie or on Rogan because it was just
I
such
mean,
a
yeah.
massive space. Yeah.
Yeah, I saw the podcast too. I do agree it was Joe Rogan going on Bernie. I mean, it's really Joe Rogan going on whoever's joining him, really, because he just says whatever their opinions are back to them. Um,
Yeah. Yeah.
he really is one of the weakest messengers. Like he's one of the weakest people ever. The fact he could change so quickly and just like this, like the fact he has not talked to Kyle Kalinske at all after this entire political process, and Kyle was literally there on election night in like 2020 is really really upsetting there. But yeah, for Democrats. The conversations I hear a lot, I've really been talking a lot about like the Charlie Kirk propaganda machine and his ability to turn everything into a culture and a culture war topic and a social issue debate, whether it's BLM, abortion, pretty much any topic for them goes back to immigration. You can literally say anything at all. And right now, I mean, Trump is killing America by destroying our ability to have students, international students. Everything ties back to immigration or some social issue for them. Do you believe that Democrats need to change their approach to so if you go to any Democratic organizing spaces, there are some different approaches, but when it comes to announcing pronouns every single time you enter a space, and also when it comes to land acknowledgments, do you think Democrats need to pull back on those things, or even a little bit further, terms like white privilege and toxic masculinity?
Probably should pull back a bit on that stuff. What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, for me, even talking to trans people, not every trans person wants to announce their pronoun and do
Right.
land acknowledgements every single time they talk. I usually
Yeah.
approach it like, and especially if it's like a new person into your organizing group, or like if anyone organizes locally, someone might come because they're curious, and if you just say, nice to meet all of you. We're gonna go around the room. Just tell us what you want us to know about you. I think that's a great solution that'll create even more conversations than having just like cookie cutter icebreakers.
Yeah.
So yeah,
I'm
yeah.
sure you're aware there was an Axios article. There was some kind of a summit with the Democratic Party, and I don't know who was advising them, but they came away with like there were like five big sort of things that they should probably incorporate in their strategy moving forward. And I think one of them was like one of them touched on what you're talking about here, and it might be tied into like small donors having an outsized influence on the conversation. Are you familiar with what I'm talking about?
Yeah, I think I'm somewhat familiar. Was it small donors or just in general like loud activist types?
I think it was both, but I think it's kind of linked. Like so, like the lot that you might hear that at first and think like that seems kind of backwards. Like should we be taking our marching orders from like corporate donors or PAC money
Mm-hmm.
rather than small donors? But I think the logic is actually kind of sound. So like if someone is engaged enough to donate to a political campaign, that already skews them pretty well to the left of like the median voter. And so I think the concern there is if we allow small donors to have an outsized uh, impact on policy, then that will reflect a kind of like disconnect with what median voters are actually asking for. But yeah,
Yeah, definitely. Have you ever had the pleasure of being a part of some type of um, I guess you could say a diversity meeting or DEI consultation or like racial sensitivity training at the
no,
corporate kind of level? So many of these things are real. So I forget who the author was, but when they're talking about critical race theory, the main author for the book about white privilege, I forgot their name right now. But it is true in many corporate settings, their solution to addressing systemic racism, and many of the prominent leaders of the consultant class in the party. And when I say consultant class or ownership class. I'm not like super far left, so I'm saying that, and I'm trying to be as general as possible. So if you want me to go deeper into defining those things, definitely let me know. I don't want to seem like I'm talking about some cabal of elites, like a far left person would say. But it
Yeah.
is true. The solution is not really full reform within these companies. They would rather the conversation be around microaggressions and only microaggressions. I've been in groups for different institutions where it's called literally you have white individuals, you have people of color, and you have them separated, and you call the white people the white accountability group, and the other group is going to be called the group that the white accountability group needs to kind of talk about their whiteness to.
This
So
is
there
great.
is
This is hold on. This is a real thing.
yes, it does happen, and I hate talking about it because when I
Wait,
talk
I'm
about
just
it,
curious. I'm just curious.
yeah.
Like, has anyone in my chat been in a situation like this? I'm just curious, but keep going.
Yeah, it might be for, it depends on the organization. It depends on who they pay because they'll pay for consultants to come in, whether it's for messaging or for sensitivity, racial sensitivity trainings. And then that takes all the onus off of the organization. So the organization can just say, if there's any discrimination lawsuits, like, hey, we paid these individuals to come in and do their little seminar for our employees, so
Mhm.
we have no legal responsibility. And when I see the party operate and I see, certain individuals being elected to like vice chair roles and everything like that, it is very true. Many of them are cut from that cloth. It is not usually individuals who are from the real organizing, including many people of color. And I don't want to go into this too much, but how did you feel about the David Hogg, is it, or Hodge? I forget which one.
Well, there's a couple different angles there. So, like, how do I feel about him being ousted, or how do I feel about his efforts?
Yeah, I guess his efforts first, and then also, I mean, there's a conversation on should the person who is a vice or a co-chair be doing something like that to run against, openly run like publicly with a pack against members of the party, and then
Yeah.
just the general push to oust them. Yeah, I guess pretty much in totality.
Um, I think like the big criticism that people had in 2016 was that they felt like the DNC was intentionally putting their thumb on the scale, which is not supposed to be the function of the DNC. Like the function of the DNC is just like kind of just generally just about winning elections, securing majorities, just like the overall health of the party. And they're not supposed to be like ideologically aligned to like one faction or another.
Hmm.
And so like to have someone like Hogg who is a part of an effort to primary people, which like I don't necessarily oppose, to have him be in such a high position within the DNC, that does seem to sort of violate that principle. And so yeah, to me it kind of makes sense to push him out. Like how do
Okay.
you feel about
From a institutional level for the DNC, or the organizational level, I do. Yeah, I definitely agree. Someone in that position should not be doing that. I think it's a big issue that I believe, and someone can fact check me on this. I might actually look it up really quick, but I don't think Nancy Pelosi did a debate to keep her seat in. I think it was almost like 40 years or something really, really, really long. And I think that's just not a good standard. If all the party leadership will be from New York and California, which is what it is right now. I mean, even AOC, who I really like, obviously she's also from New York. So it's New York or California. And then these are very uncontested races. It's very rare you're going to have party leadership be from a state that is like or from like a very a moderate district, which is super interesting. Um, the main conversation that I was upset with when it comes to that was the arguments against challenging incumbent Democrats at all. One argument they used was many of these leaders are going to be people of color, and you're going to be kicking people of color out of their seats. And I heard that in this whole conversation of why it matters to address like systemic racism and representation and leadership. Um, and I hear that, and I'm like, it seems like using people of color as a little bit of a shield, because why not just endorse? I mean, there's so many young leaders of color ready to get out there who are ready. They are ready to freaking go. And the fact that our party is going to be saying, "Oh, but we're kicking out people of color in these leadership positions," no, we're going to run people of color to replace them who are more ready to go, who want to be fighting for these issues, who want to be out there organizing and
that?
protesting.
So
I
wait.
just did not like that as an excuse for why he should not be doing it at all. But I do agree with you with in terms of like his position in the party.
Well, I mean, those are, I think, yeah, like two separate things, right? Like
Hmm.
him trying to oust people that he perceived to not be fighters, I guess, and then him acting as vice chair. Those are like two separate discussions, I guess. But like,
Yeah.
are you arguing that the DNC should should ideologically align itself with progressives and make a concerted party-wide effort to elect progressives across the country?
No, I do. I just think there should be more competitive primaries because, I mean, like Chris Murphy right now, I'd say is more moderate, but he's fantastic. He does the media appearances. He's on TV constantly. He's doing the new media. He's doing a bunch of different procedural things in Congress. So we need more leaders like that who are ready for the moment for messaging. So it doesn't need to be progressives. It could even just be a more engaged person in general. And I just think we shouldn't laugh at or turn our noses at a younger person who wants to encourage younger individuals to run, especially after Democrats just had a few members pass away.
Should the DNC involve themselves in these particular matters and like support certain primary challengers?
No. So I'd say it should be no for that answer. But also, if you're involved with the DNC, I see a lot of surrogates still giving these very public opinions. I would just, I mean, in messaging, I would just say it's not good to discourage competition in general. Like I said, it is an issue, I think, even from a perception standpoint, where your party leaders are not tested at all when it comes to election. I think it shows like more weakness in general for the overall party. But
Well, let's take it back to Bernie, because
yeah,
that was the big disagreement. You wanted to talk. I was just starting to watch your video where you're talking about his appearance on Flagrant, but I didn't really get through it. But I suspect we'll probably disagree on this one.
Yeah, so for Bernie Sanders, my big issue, so one example of like messaging that can be bad for the right wing is using words like white privilege and toxic masculinity ad nauseum, and not going into different nuances. If you completely disregard anyone who feels uncomfortable when they hear those statements, and they might not be in academia, so they don't know what point you're really getting to. If the left says like, oh, there's an issue with white men and their toxic masculinity and white privilege, that is propaganda that'll help someone like Charlie Kirk. Whenever the left canceled someone who was 12 years old and they rapped along to Lil Baby and rapped along to the N-word, whenever the left cancels a child who does that, being someone who came from a very red area, I understand what the process is like getting out of an area like that and out of those ideologies. So canceling that kid or using this language can be super beneficial to the white nationalist or the Christian nationalist or the Charlie Kirk MAGA side. They love it. They're like, oh yes, thank you. Please keep doing this, lefties. This is an 80-20 issue, blah, blah, blah. I think when it comes to Bernie, okay, and I went from being this like conservative area, becoming more progressive. I'm sure Bernie was a good outlet for me for that as well. And I had a period where I was like in that quote unquote Bernie bro category where I could have definitely fell to like a Hassan ideology of being illiberal or anti-democratic, but I was lucky to find different creators that had a more pragmatic message. But I fear just like the issue can arise when someone is like, okay, should I follow Charlie Kirk or Hutch, for example? If someone is, looking at Bernie's race, and we can get into the details there, and they see your messaging on it saying basically, and I want to hear your position actually really quick on what you say to progressives who said the election was unfair to Bernie.
What I usually say is that a lot of that narrative is just based on abject lies. It's just not true. So like I remember back in 2016, I bought into that sort of narrative as well. Mm-hmm. So I don't remember, it was maybe a couple months removed from the convention, I think, is when stuff really started popping off. I think the DNC leaks happened shortly before the convention in July. And so I started to see the narrative pop up on social media, and the dominant narrative was like, oh my God, we've just uncovered evidence that the DNC is like literally robbing Bernie of the nomination. And I accepted that uncritically at face value at the time. I was like, I'm disgusted. I remember even tweeting out like, if Hillary wins, I'm just going to abstain. And then like went back on that like a week after the convention. I was like, wait, hold on. Trump is actually fucking insane, and it looks like he could win. So I am going to support her in this race. But I remember looking into the details. I'm like, okay, so people are saying that they stole this election. They stole this primary from Bernie. I'm like, okay, well, what does that actually mean? And so I looked into what the claims were making. And like a big claim, for example, was like, oh, the super delegates were super stacked against Bernie. And then I looked at the numbers and I was like, okay, well, I mean, like, it looks like if you take all the super delegates away, she still easily clears him. So like, what else is it? And everything else I just found was like very flimsy, like there was a big hubbub about Donna Brazile. Very like, I'll just say like, it was totally improper for her to do it. But she unsolicitedly, if that's a word, sent Hillary Clinton advanced CNN questions, which that's something that like that doesn't look great, right? But the question I think was about like water in Flint, Michigan, and there was a 0% chance that Hillary Clinton had not already obviously prepared for that question. Um, and so there, if I think about when I looked into it more, I also looked into like, okay, well, like what was Bernie's like path to victory? And when I looked at, what the numbers were saying, what the future contests looked like, and what those polls were saying, it was just so obvious that he did not have a path. Like he straight up did not have a path. And I think people got wrapped up in the cult of personality of Bernie. I think he was pushing a message that excited a lot of progressives because we had never seen anybody that progressive get that much traction within the party. And that was exciting for someone like me who was, basically like an anti-capitalist, like super left when I was younger in my 20s. I never thought I would see the day where someone like Bernie Sanders was like, doing as well as he was. In retrospect, though, like when I look at the numbers, he was not actually like competitive. Like it was clear that she was going to win. And so one more thing, and then I'll let you pick up. But like when we look at the dates of the emails that were exposed by the Guccifer hack and the WikiLeaks dumps, the dates were from like April and May. And so this was after Super Tuesday. Like this was after it was very obvious that she was going to be the nominee. And so when I look at that context, yes, I think it is improper for the DNC to have done what they did. I think, Debbie Wasserman Schultz had a good reason to resign because I don't think it was proper for them, even if they knew she was going to be the nominee, which, they did know that. They shouldn't have done that. However, it does kind of paint it in a different context. They were feeling resentful at the time that Bernie was staying in the race all the way up to the convention, even though he knew he was going to lose, because he wanted to send a message to the establishment. They were resentful towards him because that forced Hillary Clinton to spend money and time and resources fighting him when she could have been fighting Trump. And that, I think, is a legitimate grievance. That, when I look back on Bernie's decision to stay in the race as long as he did, I think that was a massive, if well-intentioned, blunder that did help Trump, just logistically. But anyways, yeah, that's my top-down view of things.
Okay, yeah, and I'm sure Hillary was really mad as well. And I don't like the way she was in that position, kind of being the next one up, because Obama was able to beat Hillary after, I'm pretty sure, losing the popular vote in 2008, right? So Hillary was seeing like part two happen. She was really upset about that. I don't know if you could pull this up.
I don't think she felt threatened in the same way, though.
Yeah,
because I don't think any realistic pollster was looking at the path, and I don't think any realistic pollster was saying that Bernie Sanders actually had a chance of winning that nomination.
So the thing I would say is, do you think there was an appearance from either the media or the superdelegates at any point during the primary or even in the 2020 process when, for example, Elizabeth Warren stayed in the race and dedicated her time to, anyone can Google this, smearing Bernie as a raging sexist. There was even a hot mic moment after one of the debates where Elizabeth Warren went really hard for a few weeks on the whole sexism thing, which falls into the using identity politics as a shield, which is a very important thing that's kind of distorted at that time for political reasons. The whole push against Bernie going on Rogan, but that's a whole party issue thing, which we agreed on. Bernie getting slammed for saying Washington Post was influenced by Jeff Bezos was a big thing as well. And I remember like watching the primary, and CNN would dedicate primetime slots every night almost to docuseries about evil, racist, misogynist Bernie bros attacking women and people of color online. And I was like, this is really weird to me. Like at that time, especially being a young person getting into Democratic politics, that's one big thing that soured me on Democrats. I understand it now, and I do agree with many of your points on why Bernie like did legit lose. But do you see appearances there that could be like that can make someone be distrustful?
I think there's obviously an institutional bias against Bernie and his politics, obviously. But I guess the way that I look at that, I don't necessarily look at that as like a nefarious plot. I look at that as like an ideological divide. Like these are people with a very profoundly different view of what proper governance looks like. And, you know, quite frankly, I think it's just, it's the job of the progressive candidate to overcome those institutional biases. Like, it's the job of the candidate, the progressive candidate, to convince primary voters that their version of government is preferable to more moderate establishment types. And my view of what happened in 2016 and 2020 is that Bernie was not up to the job. He was not the right candidate. I mean, you can say that he got you excited. I'm sure he got a lot of young people interested in politics. And so, I mean, that's good, I think. Like, we can probably say that's good. But, you know, to me, it's not enough to get someone interested in politics. To me, I think the job for like what I view like my job as is like, I try to convince people that the stakes in politics right now are so high. They're way higher than at any point I've been alive. And I'm trying to get people to take these stakes seriously and understand what the dynamic is. And right now we have a two-party system in the United States. Doubt that's going to change anytime soon. And the Democratic Party, with all of its imperfections, is the only opposition party that can prevent what I think will be a dystopian nightmare. And so, you know, am I saying never criticize the Democratic Party? No, but when you have someone like Bernie go on flagrant and they say, well, we haven't really had a fair primary since I think 2012, which I don't even know what that means, because, you know, Obama didn't debate his primary challengers in 2012, but Bernie without hesitation says yes. And so it's like, okay, cool. You're getting young people interested in politics, but you're also telling them that the Democratic Party is institutionally corrupt to the extent that they rigged it against him. He propagates that narrative, and to me, that's just a cardinal sin that it's difficult for me to forgive. So I've soured on him recently. I don't support him. You know, I think that's a very damaging thing to say. On top of it just being not true. Like, he took a shot and he failed. That's what happened.
Yeah, my big issue here is I want to make sure that we don't like disregard anyone's like feelings towards this, because I don't want them to go to Hassan, or even in some areas. I know Kyle's a lot better now, but even like a Kyle Kalinske, who may make them sour on Democratic politics in general.
We can get into old Kyle stuff, but whatever. It's
but yeah. So do you think that like in primaries, like momentum matters, like the first couple states?
Yeah.
I don't know if you could pull up the graphic. I sent you it on Discord DMs. You don't need to. It just shows a vision or a view of what primary voters at the time in 2016 were seeing.
I understand this logic.
Yeah, so like at this point, when you have all these superdelegates added on at the beginning, which is a rule that Bernie got changed. That's one big thing. They said you cannot add superdelegates to the entire count until the end of the primary, because back then Bernie was up in overall delegates, but the news cycle was almost 100% negative on CNN, MSNBC. And I started off as a Bernie Bro channel, so I covered a lot of this. I do regret a lot of those videos, but I do think these are still big issues where if we disregard this completely, like this psychologically to voters, it is terrible. It does look terrible. And the fact where Bernie Sanders can go from almost nothing to being one of the most popular national political figures, I just think we need to give him flowers in some regard. And we have to move people away from saying it's rigged by giving at least some credence to like, okay, the whole idea that the media at the time, especially with Jake Tapper right now, I feel like Jake Tapper with the shamelessness of this Biden book is showing how terrible CNN and MSNBC can be. So if we can use this Bernie topic and actually leverage how Bernie used his electoral success to move different Biden policies, Inflation Reduction Act, American Rescue Plan, if we could say to these lefties, Bernie got this success being electoral, and he did not even like the party. So you could even be someone who just hates the party, but still get power and influence the party by using your power to be like a mini third party within it. If we can instead pivot people away from the Hassans of the world and give them a vision of political power in this conversation, I really, really, really think it'd be worthwhile. It'd be worthwhile to leverage that to do this and to use Bernie in a positive way here.
There are a couple things to unpack there, but like, just to start, I don't think we should have super delegates fucking period. I mean, I think like just I understand why the mechanism exists. It exists because they want a safeguard against someone like Trump, right? Like, but the very idea of it, I think is just such a turnoff, especially in the 21st century, that it lends credence to the narrative that it's being rigged.
Yeah.
I can't tell you how many people I had coming into my chat who legitimately thought that if you took the super delegates away, Bernie would have won, which is just not true. I take your point about momentum. I think that even if the super delegates were not in play at all, that Bernie Sanders did not have a great chance against Hillary Clinton. If we contextualize Hillary Clinton back in like 2015 or whatever, I'm not sure when her numbers started to turn, but at one point she was insanely popular in this country. She had like a 65% approval rating when she was the Secretary of State. And then Fox News hit her with the Benghazi stuff and of course the email stuff. And like that started to really, show cracks in the foundation of her support. And eventually that just kind of collapsed during the election cycle. But she was before that like a really strong candidate, and basically everybody knew that she was going to be the nominee. That's what all the polls were saying, like overwhelmingly before. And I understand, like you can have someone like Barack Obama, for example, that was polling like less than 2%, and he went on to win. So it's like it's not like these things don't happen. But I just think that there's a much simpler, more elegant explanation for why Bernie lost. I think it's the correct explanation, and it's that number one, he just didn't do very well. He struggled a lot with black voters. Those are enormously popular part of our coalition.
Hey, watch out for Mayor Pete. If Bernie struggled, Mayor Pete is out there in a drought.
I mean, yes, I take your point. I understand. I do understand that. I've thought about that a lot. I want it to be Pete, but I understand that that's like a really big hurdle to overcome. But the second thing that I think is just a more elegant, simple explanation is that the party itself is just not as progressive as one might assume if they consume all their news from hyper left-wing sources online. There's this theory that the country is like super progressive secretly, and we just need like a Manchurian candidate, like supercell person to get in there and just say the right password, and then it'll unlock everyone's super progressive minds. I don't see any real evidence of that.
Now, here's my big theory. I feel like a candidate can be less popular with Democrats in a primary, but somehow be more popular with low propensity voters in elections. And my big anecdote for this, which is it's pretty big to me and pretty personal, but my best friend growing up, obviously, white guy, watches Joe Rogan, Theo Von, works in maintenance. Every election, I beg him to register to vote. He never did it. He would never register to vote. He said, "I'll never do it. I don't see the point in it. None of these candidates can do anything that I care about. My vote doesn't matter," and all that kind of stuff for years and years and years. And if I give a description about him to someone that I'd work with, for example, they might just assume like, oh, he's probably racist, white guy, maintenance, watches Joe Rogan, Theo Von from the middle of rural America, whatever. But he came up to me one day. He came up and said, "Hey, I know who I'm voting for." And I'm like, "You're voting?" He's like, "Yeah, I was in the Taco Bell line and I saw Kamala Harris on a podcast talk about price gouging, and I was really angry about how much my taco cost. And I think that if she's able to hold companies accountable with price gouging, then Taco Bell they don't pay their employees anymore, but they still raise prices. Like, I'm happy a politician's finally addressing this." So I do have I agree.
And there was a reason why was a reason why she went with that messaging. Like they did focus tests and they saw that the populist rhetoric was really appealing to people. So like the way that they addressed the housing issue, it was a really kind of pragmatic approach, like incentivize development and try to crack down on landlords illegally colluding with each other. But that particular thing of like we need to crack down on these like evil landlords, obviously that was like focus test, and that indicates that people want a populist type message.
Yeah, but I think my big issue is, and I don't know if you'd agree, but I feel like her messaging started off more populism. And I think you can use populist messaging without being an anti-institutionalist or without being an actual populist. I think Bernie's more of a reformist even. I think an actual like populist to me has a negative connotation. But I feel that she started more populist in her messaging and finished more abundance. Okay, so I feel like she did kind of say more about deregulation, like in the debates. When Trump's talking about random cats and dogs, she says, "Oh, talk about extreme," and then she talks about like small business tax credits. I just feel like at that point, Tim Walz, his post reflection of the election even reinforced this idea that it started off with a lot of these really fierce organizers, and then the consultants took over, and even Tim Walz was afraid to speak out against them. And I've said before that you rerun Biden's presidency his policies, you add in some more rhetoric about taxing the wealthy, because no one even knows. When I talk to Trumpers or progressives, they don't know Biden tried raising the tax rate from 21% to 28% on, I think, like three different occasions, and Republicans blocked it. So if Democrats had better messaging and they talked more like a Bernie, but they ran on the same policies, I think it'd be a done deal, in my opinion.
Well, there's somebody put the polling in the chat, but there's, polling that just came out yesterday that showed that populism just like fucking dominates abundance messaging. Like, I mean, I think abundance, like, so far, I'm only halfway through the book, but I find it very appealing. I find it very compelling. And they make some really good arguments. So like, I think I'm moving towards like supporting like an abundance agenda. That doesn't mean that you should like run on, what was the example that they gave? Like, there was like super in the weeds, like wonky kind of, verbiage that was in the book that was in the way that, also like the poll itself, I think, was a little bit problematic, because I feel like I feel like you can wrap abundance in populism if you got creative, and the two aren't necessarily mutually exclusive. But to your point, yeah, like there's a huge appetite for populist rhetoric right now, and so I don't even disagree with you that the Democrats need to like embrace that to an extent. The extent to which Bernie takes it, where like when he takes the anti-establishmentism to the level where he's legitimizing the idea that the party robbed him of the nomination, to me that's like an unforgivable sin. I mean, like, what do you think about that? Like, don't you think that's harmful for him to go on flagrant and be like, yeah, they rigged it? That's just essentially what he did.
I think that Bernie Sanders, if I were Bernie in that position, I do agree with you it's damaging, but in that position, and this is also why Bernie did not have as much support in the party. He really was not a Democrat. He did not have the support because he hated Democrats. Like, that's why he's an independent. But he also suffered when it comes to endorsements because of that exact fact. So we need to be realistic, and that's why I talk to my young progressives out there, trying to siphon them away from Hassan and sometimes Kyle, trying to siphon them away to be more pragmatic and focus more in like 2025 elections is probably bigger than 2026. I have a whole theory on that, but just for this conversation about Bernie and his rhetoric, I don't like that he reinforced that idea on that podcast. I do think there's a way to be very anti-Democrat and say, like, I'm not like the old Democrats. I am the new Democrat, and I'm sick of them. We're firing all the Biden and Kamala people. We're gonna get all the new staffers. We have new messaging. We have Wes Moore. We have Josh Shapiro. We have Pete going on all the podcasts. We have AOC. I think AOC is the one that threads this line so perfectly. But I would just be like, when you give criticisms to Bernie, one big thing that I just want everyone to stay away from, that you said in your video about like Bernie being unsuccessful. I know you think he's like unsuccessful when it comes to winning elections. But also, I'm sure, I mean, if we actually talk about it, obviously we're responding to the Vanguard boys about Bernie, and I'm sure you'd agree he was still successful in moving policy, which is one thing I was going to challenge you on. But after hearing you talk about it, I think you'd agree on that. He did influence some Biden policies, and also AOC ran after working for Bernie Sanders. Like, AOC ran with the Bernie Sanders infrastructure. She's now probably a top 5 most influential politician in America. So I would even give AOC's a lot of her success and her springboard. A lot of that credit to the foundation Bernie set up to be the actual like pragmatist for the moment that Bernie could not be.
Don't you think it's kind of interesting though that like the success that you're pointing to with Bernie is a success that was born out of like kind of doing the opposite of his strategy. Like, his strategy has been to do these, sometimes subtle, other times not so subtle, sort of like scorched earth against the party apparatus, like the party itself. And when he, focused on building a coalition with Biden and working with the moderate wing or the more establishment wing, whatever you want to call it, that's when he actually saw the most success, because he was able to influence Biden's policy. They invited him in the room, and they were, the ARP was ended up as it was originally presented, like, and it went further to the left of what he promised on the campaign trail. They didn't get everything, but
and that's the conversation of political capital. So I would say Donald Trump has been extremely successful getting political capital. I mean, if he wanted to pass the biggest immigration law in American history right now, he could easily get it done. So I would even say that's an example of Bernie Sanders using the anti-party rhetoric. I think that even proves that he got political capital from that. He could then use to influence real policy. The issue is that Trump has no good intentions for America. His political capital is destroying the Constitution, but he still did get it. He still is getting consent from the public because we do live in times where people want a populist message, and there is something to the effect of and I'm not an anti-capitalist, leftist, socialist, whatever. I don't. They're all dorks that just they're weenies that are online reading theory all day. We don't care about them. I hope we just stop talking to them eventually. Too bad Hassan's so big because we're kind of forced to. But yeah, even from the perspective
you
of
said I was too mean to them, or you kind of implied that I was too mean to them, or the way that I engage with them is not productive. I could be doing a better job.
Yeah, because I want you to be like
that side.
I want you to be a manipulator, a counter propagandist. I want you to refine your propaganda to be a lib pilled, but still sound populist. Kind of what you want.
I'm open to suggestions, by the way, because I'm fully aware that like my strategy right now is like, fuck you. I don't want you in the coalition. But it should be like, what can I say to elicit like a positive? I mean, you're right. Like I if I was more serious about it, like I'm more just emotional right now, just because we lost a really bad, big election and things are just really bad right now. So I'm just more angry in the immediate aftermath of the election. And I just saw so many of them say the most outrageous shit. When someone like Hassan with an audience of like 40,000 viewers says, well, we don't have any evidence that Kamala would be better than Trump on Gaza.
Oh, yeah.
I want to like vomit. I want to like vomit and punch a hole in my door. And so I let that emotion kind of guide me most of the time these days. So I will concede to you that I'm not the most calculated person these days when it comes to messaging. So if you have any suggestions for how to fucking mind trap these people, then sure, let's hear it.
Well, if you ever get me on the Live and Learn, okay, I actually, Pisco gave me credit after his Tim Pool, his first Tim Pool appearance. I talked to Pisco a decent amount about using some of my more aggressive tactics to make sure we are not just insulting individuals, but we're pointing out blind spots and weaknesses they have and being really aggressive on it. So like for progressives that say voting doesn't matter, I challenge them in like 2025. If young people voted at the clip they vote in national elections in 2025, they can uproot this entire program at the core, at the school board, at the county commissioners, at the city councils, the borough councils. Like if we voted hard in 2025, that's the real point for me where I think we can show political power. Is destabilizing their movement at the core in 2025. I know we're talking 2026, but I'm saying to young people, how do you know if voting works? You guys don't vote. And if you want to talk about the racist white men with the property who pay property taxes, they're the ones banning trans people from the schools. So if you want to get your ass out there and vote, if you claim to care about trans people, if you want to lie and say you care about trans people, but you don't vote for school board elections, I don't want to hear you talk about trans issues anymore, because that's where that's the epidemic of what's happening right now. And yeah, using that more like challenging aggressive rhetoric, I think is definitely really fun. And I think
the problem is doubly bad because a lot of people on the left, the lesson that they learned when Trump won was voting doesn't work. This is fucking bullshit. And on the other side of things, people were like, oh my God, voting works. Like we got Donald Trump to be the president of the United States. Like, holy shit. So like they're like super animated and hyped up and energized and motivated and catalyzed, and then you have like these progressives that are like, we voted for Hillary Clinton and Roe v. Wade got overturned, so like what's the point? Well, it's like like enough people didn't vote, and like that is literally the reason why Roe v. Wade got overturned. So like these people are learning the exact wrong the wrong lesson from that event.
That's what I say to my little progressives, because I come from that Bernie bro cloth. It's like, yeah, sure, these things were not fair. Like Bernie getting yelled at for going on Joe Rogan, and Bernie being called a sexist, which was outrageous at the time. Bernie being called a racist, misogynist who gets his supporters to attack people online in a terrible notion and all this stuff. Fine, say it's unfair. It's not rigged. Don't act like it's rigged. It's politics. If you don't want to fight hard enough for these issues that you claim to care about, don't. But if you want to change it in the future, then come up here. The voting blocks, like even from my perspective, working within some of these fields, the larger the voting block goes for young people, the larger it becomes, the more politicians got to listen to it. And if you don't want to keep on having, I just saw yesterday, I don't know why I just thought about this. I really want to hear reactions and chat too for progressives. But when Corey Booker stood for that record long non filibuster. Did you see that he's releasing a book titled Stand? Yeah,
No.
he's releasing a book titled Stand, and I just thought that was really on the nose for a lot of the claims about like moderate Democrats and how they message.
His
Oh my
his
goodness.
numbers actually went way up after that. I don't know if you saw, but like I think they
Hmm.
went back down. But like
Yeah,
right in the week after he did that standing filibuster or whatever it was, he shot up to like second place in the
mhm.
polls or whatever.
Well, that was the
So
frustration. It's like the liberals were sitting around doing book reviews of abundance and like doing books on Stand. And Chuck Schumer was peddling a book around after he voted for the Trump budget. And meanwhile, the progressives were out there getting huge crowds. And I did give you credit on that because you did say that AOC and Bernie at the time were meeting the moment. So I do really appreciate
mhm.
that, even if you soured on Bernie. Are you okay? You're soured on Bernie. Before we get off here, are you still kind on or still happy with like AOC?
Yeah, I think she's really savvy, and I think more importantly, she's shown the capacity to mature. I think she so like I think like I think I understand why like a lot, especially younger people, are attracted to the like scorched earth, burn it all down. We need to like reinvent the party kind of messaging. I understand why that's appealing. I don't agree with it tactically. I don't think it's realistic. Number one, number two, like I think that having an inter-party like full-on civil war when we're up against fucking Hitler, you know, I don't know. I might get in trouble for saying that, but like when we're up against Donald Trump, who is just like uniquely dangerous, I think this is just the wrong time to do that. And I got into it with like Marxism the other day, and
Mm-hmm.
his position is that AOC and Bernie need to do a clean break, and it's like the thing that I was struggling with him the most was that he was of the mind that like we're already at rock bottom, like it's already that bad. Like things are so bad that we don't have a choice but to potentially like irrevocably fracture the party and essentially hand enough power to Republicans that they could pass constitutional amendments. And his whole reasoning again was like we're already at rock bottom. It's like you have no fucking idea. Like you seem to have no concept of how much worse things could be if we give them the kind of majorities that you are seemingly advocating for. I feel like I went on a little bit of a tangent there, but like AOC, I think she does a good job of speaking to not only just young people, but like we saw a lot of evidence of, for example, the people who voted for both Trump and AOC. Now that seems like to people like you and me, like an insane contradiction because ideologically we can't. I mean, these two people are just diametrically opposed to each other. It shouldn't make sense. But what people were attracted to was that kind of fiery fight like anti-establishment rhetoric. And so I think she's savvy in that regard. And I do appreciate that she is more disciplined now. Like, she with her whole chest endorsed Biden in 2024. And I honestly thought she was like one of his strongest cheerleaders. Like she was out there like really hyping him up, and she met that moment, and so I'm like really grateful in that respect. But I also like, do you think I have serious doubts that she's ready for a national run in 2028? Like, what do you think about that?
So for Democrats, I do strongly believe, and I see it. I mean, black women work everything. If you go to any city anywhere, I mean, black women run for free. They volunteer their time to run our democracy, to be honest. And black women and black voters in general are probably going to decide who the candidate is for Democrats. So as far as the Democratic primary goes, and progressives, AOC by far does the best with black voters. Now I know Bernie had issues. He was not religious either, so that's a big thing. A lot of like black churches, for example, or more conservative black
Mm-hmm.
voters. But if AOC can maintain her numbers with especially Hispanic voters, white voters, progressives do well. I mean, even Bernie did well with Hispanic voters in general, like Nevada and a couple other states. So the progressive messaging does appeal to the exact demographics, or not progressive, sorry, populist. They're different things, in my opinion. Of the populist messaging or the anti-establishment messaging does appeal to the exact demographics Democrats cannot get. And I think I look at the intangibles of candidates and their ability to shift and be good stewards of public opinion rather than just like following whatever the polls are. And I hear people like like a Destiny or like or a couple other like more moderate creators who say things like running on taxing the rich won't be popular, or running on better healthcare won't be popular. I think we need to, and this is a big thing that I criticize progressives for during the primary. About like what actually shifts votes and what the voter blocks are that are available. So you have campaigning with Liz Cheney. They love bringing that up. She was spending every day with Liz Cheney and she was with Liz Cheney every day. That ruined the campaign. No one cared about Liz Cheney. Okay, any voter that did care about Liz Cheney being in the campaign, for or against, was already decided in who they voted for. No swing voters, no median, no low information voters decided their vote based on Liz Cheney. Now, in the same regard, if you understand how bad Trump is for democracy and everything, then you're going to be voting Democrat the next election. So that is a given already. So let's say AOC is less popular with like conservative Democratic voters. We already know they're going to vote against the Trump MAGA, hopefully. If their policies, if they have like an approval rating, but their policies appeal to that one demographic of low propensity voters that we need for a national election, I think if we carve out those demographics, there is a way where you can be less popular nationally, but be a better overall general election candidate, which is a really unique political time we live in. But the numbers of voters that are low propensity for these national elections has been insane in 2020, 2024. So that's my theory on if AOC can be successful.
And they went for Trump by a huge margin.
Yeah, and AOC had the best crossover votes, right? With Trump voters.
Yeah. Late breakers and low propensity voters were overwhelmingly Trumpy this time around. And I think you can explain that for a number of ways. I mean, part of it you can point to various weaknesses in Kamala's campaign. And I think that's fair. That's like good to have that criticism. There was also just an overall anti-incumbent climate across the world because of economic circumstances. That was going to make the job really difficult, whoever the nominee was. So, but I get a lot of flack because at the time when she was campaigning with Liz Cheney, I was like, I get it. And I think progressives need to ask themselves, like, why did she do that? Like, why do you think they chose to focus a good amount of time on potentially swaying like Nikki Haley Republicans? That's who they were targeting with that, right? Like, if you can claw like 5 or 6% of like the Republican electorate, who, I mean, and there was indications that Trump had some vulnerabilities. So like during his primary contest against Nikki Haley, she was pulling like fucking 20% in some contests after she had dropped out. So clearly there was like some indication of like a portion of the Republican electorate that was not happy that Trump was going to be the nominee. And obviously Kamala was targeting them by bringing aboard Liz Cheney. Now, I feel like progressives should ask themselves, like, why didn't she spend more time courting us? I think there are answers to those questions. I would ask you that question. Like, why do you think they chose to spend as much time with Liz Cheney, which again, I think amounted to like 4 appearances. So this idea that she was out there every day is crazy. But like, yeah, why do you think she focused more on never Trump Republicans and moderates than progressives?
What's that one person's name? Is it like Lindy Lee, the former Kamala? She's now like a fascist.
She's like a MAGA grifter. Yeah.
Yeah, Lindy Lee. Okay, so I want everyone to understand. So like when I say consultant class, okay, I think some consultants are great, some are not. Some lobbyists are great, some are not. Now, Lindy Lee, individuals like that will do and say anything for the most powerful person in the room and say they're right if they have a theory. So sometimes you need to trace it back to leadership, lack of leadership, who's making decisions in different administrations. So if there is a narrative of like, for example, I can't stand Shoe on Head, okay? But she said one comment that I heard about Tim Walz, where it's like, oh, they're dressing him up in white man minstrel and having him go in front of a truck and like, I have a football, I'm a man, I fix trucks, I also like guns, where it's just so on the nose and so fabricated. It feels like, you know, those chain restaurants that are everywhere, like a Chipotle, where you know it's like the same exact model or same designs everywhere you go, but they put like the town's name in bold letters to make it seem like a local restaurant, where it's like, this is a chain restaurant that's trying to seem like a locally owned restaurant. But you're like, this feels uncomfortable. Like, this is not a small business. I don't know why it says that we're in the iron, like in Pittsburgh, that there's like a steel workers bar and it's only hipsters. And you know this is a chain restaurant that's all throughout America. That's what the Democratic astroturfing feels like. And I know, I'm probably off the original question, but like I know local parties that are underfunded and cannot get funding, and then I see billions of dollars spent on advertisements, and I'm like, yeah, I'm at a bar. I was at a bar around like I'm in Pennsylvania. I was at a bar, and a Kamala advertisement came on College Football Sunday in the bar, and it was really dramatic about the future of democracy in America. Now I'm like, I'll be honest. I really don't think spending millions of dollars to see Kamala Harris for 30 seconds in the middle of a Penn State and Michigan and Ohio State game, I don't think that's going to get any voters. And it does not. But we cannot fund these local parties. It really is. And we saw the Pod Save America episode. They really are kind of stuck in their thinking of like, okay, this is how it works. We watched the West Wing, and that's another stereotype progressives use to describe like centrist organizers. But yeah, we have an idea of how
I've
politics works.
never watched the West Wing, for the record. I'm just saying.
Have you? Yeah, me either. Me either. I understand what they mean by saying that, though.
I will
so
admit
yeah.
I like the occasional Aaron Sorkin film, but I didn't watch that show.
But yeah, oh yeah,
So
but yeah.
the question was about why do you think she focused more on never Trump Republicans and moderates than progressives?
See, I do think it's because of it's more of a safe messaging strategy. They didn't really have to be too abrasive. They could just like when Kamala's on TV saying, "Oh, he's a fascist." I'm like, my question is not why are you going after moderate Republicans or progressives. Why are you going after like common voters in general? Like the voters who are going to swing the election are low propensity. None of these focuses matter. So like I guess when you talk about progressives versus Liz Cheney, it's a lot less protesting. I'd probably say a lot less demands. They don't need to make a big presentation. Like Kamala couldn't go against Biden on Gaza, so that wasn't going to be a concession they could make. Kamala, she ran on extending Medicare to cover at home cost, and she talked about the sandwich generation. But even using the term sandwich generation on The View, like Kamala did to discuss this, I do not know one singular person who ever used that phrase in real life. So there is an issue with that speak. Yeah, for sure. I don't know if that was a good answer, but
yeah, I mean, I think you're touching on something, but I think oh boy, sorry, I got a alert that just popped up on my screen. So I think it was like I think the motivation was twofold for her to sort of pivot towards the center. The first reason is because the electorate moved towards the center during the Biden years. There was a couple big issues for voters that were by far the most salient was immigration, or more specifically the border, and the economy. And that gave Republicans a lane to sort of stage attacks. And I think it was less about policy and it was just more about kind of like vibes and just general kind of blame. And they felt just uninspired with Biden. And he was just like this convenient punching bag. He didn't do himself any favors because he just so clearly was not in any position to run again. But you had the electorate itself kind of shifting to the right, not like dramatically, but enough on the margins to make a difference. And then on the other side of this motivation, I think for Kamala's campaign to not necessarily run like Bernie did or even she did back in 2020, was that progressives have demonstrated recently that they're like not necessarily like the most gettable voters. There's like a culture in progressive media spaces of this like scorched earth thing, like Crystal Ball, for example. I don't think she voted for Kamala. Kyle Kalinske, I think he voted for Kamala in 2024, but in 2020, when he went on Rogan during election night, Rogan asked him who he voted for. He said, neither. I don't vote for war criminals. So there's this culture with progressive media spaces where like they get a lot of their clout and credibility from just relentlessly going after Democrats. I'm sure you're aware of the flow chart where everything ends with like, fuck the Democrats. Yeah, that's a pretty, that is a real thing. That's a real thing in progressive spaces. That's how they get a lot of like, their people regard them as authentic. And it's like, wow, straight shooter, balls and strikes. I like that. And people kind of position themselves as like, where I'm on the left, but I'm not a fucking bootlicker. That's kind of like the vibe. That's the thing that they go for. And there's an asymmetry there because you just don't see the same phenomenon necessarily in right-wing spaces. Like, who do we have in right-wing spaces? We have like what, Bill Kristol, and they're effectively liberals now. Like people like David Frum and Bill Kristol and a number of other sort of like never Trump Republicans. They come across as sort of like center left at this point. And so that is like that's a really powerful imbalance. And I'm not saying that we need to have people like Kyle Kalinske and Crystal Ball get up there and do fucking propaganda. I'm not saying we need to have them go up there and just, literally say like, oh, everything's great. Like Biden did nothing wrong and Kamala's campaign is perfect. But if we had a media environment where progressives instead had the view of like, look, I'm more progressive than Biden is, obviously. I'm more progressive than Kamala is, obviously. But if there was a culture of like reinforcing pragmatism as like an essential virtue of electoral strategy, then I think you would see enormous, like, I feel like if that happened, ironically, we would literally have fucking single payer healthcare at this point. If we could just activate in a semi-permanent basis, like 5 to 10% of the electorate, we could have big enough majorities to actually like go further than the ACA, codify Roe v. Wade. But these people feel like their leverage comes from not voting. And I just think that's the worst thing you can do. It's like you're giving away all your leverage when you do that. But yeah, I'm curious what your thoughts are about that.
I think the same concept I said before. Everyone like you, everyone from your political angle or your political perspective, every vote to that increases your bargaining power. If you give away your bargaining power, you cannot be upset when the system does not respond to you. But I also do understand voters are going to vote and voters are not going to vote, and the way we get them out to vote is changing rapidly. So I don't know if it's as much on left to right as policies go, more so as like vibes to vibes, or just in terms of we need someone out there who knows the current media landscape, and I know many individuals who think Trump wants to expand Social Security, and the callers into my show literally believe that Trump is for universal healthcare because he said it once in 2016, and they still just like they still hold on to it, and he's anti-establishment.
This is a common thing you get from normie Republican
Yeah.
voters.
Oh, they're propaganda masters. I mean, you saw a week ago, right, when they said, "Oh, Trump actually wants higher taxes on the wealthy." You know why they say that? So they could say, "Oh, Trump wanted it. He tried making them higher, but the Republicans in Congress said no." So they know how to place their propaganda, and we need someone who, Kamala Harris, I'm sorry, but she is a very, very bad politician. When Trump said the cats and the dog statement, I think she won by default. The fact that she laughed and went, huh, talk about extreme. And I'm not saying her laugh in terms of how she laughs, like Republicans would make fun of. But like in general, laughing, everyone already thinks Trump's a meme. Even right now, whenever a Democrat says Trump's a meme coin, it's like, you want me to go up to a voter and say Trump is corrupt. Oh, how's he corrupt? He's having foreign governments put money into his memes. It's like, can you please make your own messaging? And if you give up narratives, if you ask Kamala about like, what about the transports? Oh, I love transportation. No, transports. We are going to have a peaceful transition to the White House. It's like, no, transport. She's like, what is a I don't know where I am. It's just like, you cannot be like a deer in the headlights when you're a presidential candidate. I mean, we can talk our asses off. There's no reason if you are a presidential candidate. I don't care if your consultants are telling you different things. You should not want to look like that and look like you have weak messaging, especially with AI. Whether it's a liberal or a progressive, we just need a mix between like AOC, Jasmine Crockett, and some Pete, like sit down energy, where you know what we believe in. I don't care what AI video you see, you know what the hell we believe in. We're going to have it every single time we talk about anything. And we're going to make it very, very clear to you. We're not going to use all this jargon or policy wonkery. We're just going to make very clear statements. And this is where Kyle Kulinski, he has the funniest shit in the world. The shit he says, where he's just like having a normal voice, he's like, and that's why Republicans should probably stop sucking Trump's balls from the back. The shit he just randomly says is so hilarious. And the way he goes back to his talking points, we need that, like, and the way Bernie does that as well. We need that, but in a more measured way, because the media environment, communications environment, messaging environment is the name of the game right now. So.
Well, here's why I think like you touched on something that makes me really skeptical of AOC's viability as the candidate in 2028. If you let her cook a little bit, right? Like if she instead run primaries Schumer, and now, she's an established senator for 6 or 12 years, and maybe she makes a governor's run. There's a lot like, I think politicians have demonstrated that there are ways to sort of like shed perceived baggage. But like, so for example, AOC, in 2018, so just 8 years ago, she ran on defunding ICE, right? Like, so this is a really unpopular like policy, like really unpopular. Like even with Democrats, the highest support was for defunding ICE was 25% at the height of the anti-Trump pro-immigration stuff during his first term. And so I think like, here's what I think is going to happen in 2028. Like, I think the media is going to hammer every single Democratic candidate they're going to bait them into talking shit about Biden. And to be clear, they all should. And Biden should like not take that personally. He should be selfless and understand if the moment requires this, then it's good for the country. I will be your punching bag. I think that would unironically improve his legacy if he were to instead, like in 2024, for example, I'm sure you know, he called Kamala and said, no daylight between us. And that was his way of saying, don't talk shit about this administration.
Yeah.
And she listened to him, and that was a mistake. He should have said the opposite. He should have said, tear me to shreds if you have to. If it means saving the country, tear me to shreds. But
yeah, I think narcissism is terrible for all the levels right now.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. There's a lot of Democrats that I think, like Schumer is a really good example of that. Okay, so in that media environment in 2028, when the Democrats are just going to be doing, they're going to pummel every single Democratic candidate. I think they're going to pummel them on the border more than the economy. I don't know if the economy is going to be as salient, assuming Trump doesn't crash the economy and it, we have like standard sort of growth and things are okay in that department. They are for sure going to hammer every single Democrat on the border, and they're going to ask them like, what are you going to do that Biden didn't do? Like, if you get inaugurated and you are serving, and then all of a sudden we see border encounters surge to 300,000 people in a single month, which that doesn't even paint the whole story, right? But that's just like, I think like the most reliable metric that we can point to. What are you going to do to address that? She is going to basically have to say, I think that, she is going to have to say that she would lobby for basically like more funding for the border, more funding to hire judges and lawyers, and yes, CBP officers, more facilities to make sure that we're doing things in a humane way, that we're not packing 300 people in a space that's meant for 50 people. More facilities is actually humane. But the problem she's going to run into is that a big part of the base that she's cultivated over the years, they went full ACAB during the Trump era, and they are not open to, what do you mean, more funding for border enforcement?
Yeah, she had to leave the DSA for that.
They're going to rip her to shreds for that.
Now, my big thing
what do you think about that? And then at that point is like, who's her base? Is she going to be competitive with Pete? Or like Gavin Newsom? They're not going for the same lane. So like, how is she going to overcome that?
So I think, when it comes to AOC being a viable candidate, Donald Trump is best friends with Jeffrey Epstein. He has said very kind things about P. Diddy. He is the most corrupt president ever. Somehow he could do anything, and the propaganda works because the messaging really taps into a mass psychological operation that is run by like a Peter Thiel, Elon Musk, and all these different guys. They do this intentionally. And I think a lot of the issues you're talking about, just in terms of messaging, confident messaging with a strong narrative can overpower actual details and facts, as we know. So if AOC got a question about the border, and she just ignored the question and said, how about this? Imagine a future where everyone knows their neighbors. And when I talk about that, I'm saying if you're here 10, 20 years, you should have a chance to be a citizen in America. You're a member of our communities. We all know you. We all love you. We want you here in America. We're going to keep the border secure. We're going to make sure there's a path to citizenship. I just feel like if she can give some type of view in a strong way that's actually compelling.
You're going to get Jake Tapper push her on this and be like, what do you mean more border security? I need more. Tell me what your policy is going to be. She can't. Yeah. If she continues to dodge that, it's going to be like the situation that you just laid out with Kamala and the trans stuff, right?
Well, you know what? We're going to send all of our ICE agents. They're actually going to be patrolling the border. Instead of sending 50,000 ICE agents to go after a college girl for writing an op-ed, they're all going to the border. Because that's one of the things I bring up. Right. No, I just think it's hilarious.
Now you've lost Hassan and...
Well, I want to lose Hassan. I want Hassan to cry all the time. Being anti-Hassan is a good thing right now. I think Hassan is probably the lowest form of human being in this planet right now, because he knows better, but he does worse. Okay, and that's a terrible mix for a narcissist who's a nepo baby who has no excuse to be as dumb as he acts, because he's not that dumb. He's a radical, and I don't care at all about appealing to Hassan. I care about appealing to anyone that cares about the real world and life actually changing. Which I think, if we have a very angry, strong, progressive message that hits these points, we can rip away some of his viewers slowly. But he's huge. It's going to be very challenging. I mean, I agree. I'm happy we had this.
De-radicalizing that community, that's going to be tough.
I want to prevent.
Like,
I want to prevent them from getting more people.
I mean, yeah, like I agree. So do I. But I'm just saying, like, clawing people back from that ledge that he, you know, like when you're like, I'm assuming a really decent chunk of his audience is between like 16 and 24. I would assume that's probably like his biggest demographic. I'm just assuming that. I could be wrong. But like when you start to form like political views at that age, and when you start to develop your understanding of the community that you live in, the state that you live in, the country that you live in, and the world that you live in, those are very, very formative years. And so that kind of thinking can be very sticky. Like most people, when they form their political identity or their ideology, or they figure out what they believe in, most people don't actually change that. Like most people develop their political identity. I could be making this up. I think I remember looking at numbers that suggested this, but like most people inherit their politics from their parents, and most people stick with those politics for the rest of their life. And so like whatever you are at that age, it's going to just be really difficult to like bring people away from. I mean, it would take Hassan being like utterly humiliated over and over and over again in like a public debate with a normie lib for there to be like real damage, I think. But he just doesn't. He really insulates himself from that kind of risk, I think.
Oh yeah, it was good to hear that you're going on like H3 as well. I think using morality, the AOC quote that I think we need to keep on hanging really close to is the quote about your morality does not matter if you're not effective. Like your morality, if you cannot enact it on the world, does not matter. So like the thing I said before about like if you're not going out and organizing and voting for school board, then don't claim you care about trans people or trans kids. You know, so having that be a message that we keep on pushing forward, and you know, as much as you can on a huge platform, we call it disinformation inoculation, so like a vaccine for bad ideas pretty much. So anything you could plant like that gives like a narrative and a story to it, because no one wants a narrative of like we're gonna go past better policies and we're gonna make things better percentage by percent. We're gonna pick particular issues that are pretty popular, run hard on those. Like there's no reason every time a Democrat is on TV, I don't care what the topic is, they should be bringing up corruption, and they should have one anti-corruption bill with a fancy name. I know Josh Hawley has the Pelosi Act for the securities and stocks being banned from congressional trading. A Democrat every single time. I don't know how they don't understand repetition yet. I still see Chris Murphy and a few others go on TV and keep saying the Trump meme coin. It's like, can you guys please get consultants who can tell you what the common parlance is? Because use scam, use dark money, use other terms, and have a bill that you go back to every single time, like Kalinsky does every single time. Have that like snappy remark, so we know if you're a Democrat, you are anti-corruption. You are going to ban this all the way through. I don't want to see Josh Hawley getting higher and better headlines for being anti-corruption than Democrats, because I don't know if anyone knows this, but Josh Hawley is scary as shit because he can do the fake populist thing. He's against the Medicaid cuts. In my opinion, for long-term reasons, Josh Hawley probably scares me even more than Trump or Vance or any of them, because he looks the part. He has the rhetoric for it. He can do the whole fake right-wing populist and get a lot of people that would vote for like a progressive populist. So yeah, we got to start inoculating everything. But yeah, I appreciate that we had this conversation too.
Oh, you got to take off?
Sure. Oh no, I don't. I actually did not know how long you had, because I could be on until whenever. I didn't know if you had a stop time.
Well, I mean, like, I feel like, yeah, it's been nice having you on. I've enjoyed this conversation, chat. I hope you guys have enjoyed it too. We kind of started on this track where you were commenting about me spending a lot of time punching at lefties, and you were sort of, you know, you were also saying that my messaging strategy itself could be better. It sounded like you had an issue with me, like punching left, as it were, as much as I do. I think, I mean, maybe you can clarify, but like, let me just say, like, I think there's no better time than right now than to like wildly, violently punch left. Not literally, but like, I think this is the best time to do it, because I would rather hash this out. I would rather like challenge really bad ideas and big creators now than like right before a primary or right before the 2028 primaries, for example. Yeah. What do you
Okay,
think
so
about
the
that?
angle there is the thing I brought up before. So I was watching the clip of you talking about Vanguard, and I gave a pass to Bernie for well, not a pass for letting the statement stand. He's old. He's on a dumbass podcast with a bunch of guys that are just howling like hyenas. They just sound stupid. So he's like, yeah, it's corrupt or whatever. So I think it's still bad, like really bad, but also it still is an issue. I think you kind of said it offhandedly, but whenever you bring up Bernie's inability to be successful, or Bernie's lack of success, I'm imagining myself when I was on my path of progression. I'm like a Bernie bro. I'm in this like area where I'm like having a big ideological turn. I have some
You're gonna
content
have like a
creators.
visceral reaction to that. You're gonna have
Yeah,
like
yeah.
a
I'm gonna
fuck
be like,
this
what?
guy,
He said
man.
there's no issues at all. Well, I saw on
Yeah.
TV they said he's a racist, misogynist, and he was there in the '60s advocating for civil rights. And Elizabeth Warren said he's a misogynist. They just went with it, and he called him a. He said all. They say all his supporters are racist, evil white men, and I'm a white guy. Like I was being called a race traitor where I was from, and I did not like
Yeah.
being called an evil, racist white man at all. And I understand we have a lot of things and biases we have to deconstruct. But if I would have met one of these progressives, I may have been turned down a completely different path. So when they see you say, well, Bernie wasn't successful, I would rather you go a little bit more into, well, Bernie, there were real issues why he was not successful, which you do bring that up. You bring up those points. But also, he got really popular from 0 to 43% in the primary against Hillary Clinton. That's a huge historic undertaking. And then bring up a couple of the provisions. Like the Inflation Reduction Act is, I mean, that might be 90% Bernie Sanders. He says it's a really stupid name for political purposes, but bring up things he got adjusted by using political power for those bills. And also
They put
talk
a
about
shitload
just
of the
like,
Green New Deal in that
yeah,
package.
exactly.
I mean,
Yeah,
it was
and yeah, talk about that stuff. Yeah, that's what I mean. So don't just say he's not successful at all. Like lead. So you could point the young little Jolah watching your show. So I know you don't just hate me as a evil white man who likes Bernie because I'm an evil socialist. Like no, he just seems like a pretty decent, a decent guy, pretty principled. I want to hear you tell me like, okay, Bernie lost and maybe it was a little unfair, but he was able to get power and get real things done in the party. So how can the party be corrupt if they actually did respond to the pressure that we put on them? You know what I mean?
but I'm more like challenging the big creators that are pushing. It's not like these guys, these young people that come up with this narrative about like the primaries in 2016, 2020, they didn't, they got it from the creators that they watch. And so like,
Yeah.
I don't know what else to do besides like, so for example, I mean, that's not the only bad idea. Like the other kind of like really firmly established belief in progressive spaces is that the Democrats could turn us into a sockdem utopia and they're choosing not to because they hate progressive policy. Like, would you agree that that's like a pretty firmly established narrative with these people? Like, there's a lot of people in my chat that go along with this idea, right?
Yeah, Bernie Sanders would be a right-wing fascist in Europe.
Right. Yeah, exactly. This kind of thinking to me is like equally as destructive as telling people that the institution itself robbed Bernie. This idea that like we hate like I say we, I mean like liberals, right? Like we hate progressive policy. That's why we want to block it. It's just so reductive, to borrow a word that you used in the tweet that we were talking about. Like the Vanguard guys, for example, like I quote retweeted one of them. I didn't even realize it was the guy from the Vanguard. I think when I just showed up in my For You feed on Twitter, but he was just like, he tweeted something like, Biden should have canceled all student loan debt and he chose not to, or something to that effect. And then I either quote retweeted or I think I just replied and I just said like, I pointed out the obvious, right? Like, the Supreme Court blocked him from doing that, right? And when they were reacting to me talking to Crystal Ball, they mentioned this interaction and one of the guys was like, Hutch was in my mentions like, did you know that the Supreme Court, blocked the thing? And then he follows it up with like, have you heard of executive order, Hutch? Like, use your fucking head. This kind of thinking, I think is like so destructive. Because number one, they're painting a narrative or painting a picture that is just outrageously false. Like it's just not, that is not reality. Like what they're doing. And to me, it feels like, number two, it feels malicious. It feels like they are like a big firm part of their like foundational sort of political philosophy stems from, it feels like underneath all of it, it's like The Democratic Party is this corrupt, evil institution that hates progressives and doesn't want you to get health care. And that's this is why I'm kind of skeptical of populism, by the way, because I feel like populism attempts to answer these really complex problems with like really simple answers. And like maybe that's necessary in terms of rhetoric, but like once a candidate gets inaugurated or whatever, I don't necessarily want them to go like full populist, because honestly, like populism's history is not great when we look at a lot of historical characters across multiple countries. But like the political reality of like getting a big bill passed in this country to do like single payer healthcare, for example, it's like it is really difficult to get something like that done. Our system demands a pretty large consensus in the Congress. I mean, like it demands, with the filibuster rule in the Senate, a 60 vote threshold. And as America becomes more and more polarized, that kind of like, it's hard to imagine a 60 seat majority in the Senate for either party right now. And so it feels like we're just kind of stuck in this cycle of like, you know, we elect a president and kind of the best they can do is like these reconciliation bills. And, you know, we're not really going to see another ACA type bill until someone comes in, either on the right or the left, someone comes in and is able to put together a coalition that the kind of coalition that Obama did in 2009. The truth is that it's just hard to do these things. It's really hard to do these things. Like, I have no doubt that people like Nancy Pelosi, I mean, she did for years, like that in the 90s, her and Hillary Clinton, they were trying to do a single payer. Like they tried really hard and it was very fucking difficult. Like that's the real explanation. Politics is hard. It might take a long time. You have to fight for every single seat, like Moneyball that shit. You know, like you need to be like super optimized on every level and just minimize your losses as much as possible, maximize your gains as much as possible. Keep your eye on the fucking end zone, even if it's 90 yards away, and just keep pushing. Whereas the audience that people like the Vanguard are trying to cultivate, their message is like, fucking sledgehammer, break it all, healthcare. And like, that's and it's wrong.
You made me think about Kyle Kalinske. Do you remember when Kyle Kalinske was suggesting that that Joe Biden like illegally prosecute Joe Manchin's daughter or something like that? That was a wild time. But that stems from the populism you talked about.
Yeah.
But Bernie's strategy was like it was. Oh, was it? Were other people calling for that too?
Yeah, like Hassan was saying the same thing. I'm sure the Vanguard guys were saying the same thing. Crystal was saying the same thing. Kyle was saying, it's like the whole progressive left-wing space was like, Joe Biden should call Merrick Garland into the Oval Office and instruct him to investigate Joe Manchin's daughter unless Joe Manchin signs on to a $15 an hour minimum wage. And I'm like, once I'm confronted with that, like, I don't even really know how to engage with that besides just like rolling my eyes a bit. Like Hassan went on the Pod Save America, he's been on there a few times, but like John Lovett, like the funny one, interviewed him, and Lovett's response to that was so perfect. Because Lovett essentially just kind of like rolled his eyes. He's like, you're suggesting that Biden should like explicitly politicize the DOJ and then attack a senator's relative? And Hassan was like, yeah, that's power. That's their idea of power. And I don't know how to, I mean, like what am I supposed to do with that?
Like even a couple of weeks ago, Kyle was talking about like FDR and he let it slip for a second. And I wish I could talk. He's way too big for me, but I wish I could. Hopefully I get big enough to talk to him someday, because I've been watching him and critiquing him for a while about this. He brings up FDR and FDR's suspension of like habeas corpus, or like the alien or the Insurrection Act or whatever other crazy policies FDR used, or executive orders. I forget the whole list of them, but it was a lot. And I mean Trump is quadrupling FDR's executive orders right now, or some crazy number, which is actually insanely insane, especially out of we're not in a Great Depression, we're not at a world war, so there's no reason for that. But Trump is explicitly authoritarian, of course. But in response to that, Kyle said, you know, Trump is using this executive order power and this unconstitutional power for bad things. You know, it could be good sometimes if you do it for good things. And I'm like, what? And like, Kyle, no, you can't do that. Like, for Medicare for all, I hope everyone understands as well. I would advocate for, so the thinking is Bernie Sanders would say, we're going to do Medicare for all. And if I'm president, we're going to have rallies in all these towns and make sure the public opinion moves so far to this direction. Politicians have no choice but to adopt it, which I would say is a more legal way to do it. Obviously, you're not saying you're going to use illegal stuff to get it done. You're going to be a populist, but that can obviously lead to somewhere dangerous. But the thinking is, if you get everyone on board with a Medicare for all, then the compromise is Medicare for all who want it, which I want a different name for that. I hate that name. But the Medicare for all who want it is probably the ideal healthcare system for America, if we're being honest. That program, expanding Medicare completely, having an opt-out like Australia does, having a rebate program, and having private hospitals that you can go to if you want to pay more, that would work pretty well in America. But I don't think everyone understands that even for the markets, ripping our private healthcare system out of the markets would actually be like a larger than the Great Recession. It would be a huge. I'm pretty sure like a few of the top like 20 stocks are healthcare, I'm pretty sure. So that'd be a huge hit to everyone's portfolio. So we'd have to restructure the entire economy as well. But if we do a Medicare for all who want it and add it onto our current system, one thing I wanted to bring up about Joe Manchin. They already did do the convincing and politicking. Joe Biden, there's a reason why so many of these battery facilities are now in West Virginia. Okay, that is not by chance. I can drive through West Virginia. It's actually really good messaging if you put up a picture of an old coal plant or a steel mill and you say, hey, we're going to replace this with this shiny new battery factory. West Virginia got so many of those factories, probably because Joe Manchin knew his state was going to benefit from it. And that's how we were able to get these very slim votes in the Senate. But of course, they don't really look into the policies at that level. So I do wish we could have a combination of Ezra Klein and Kyle Kulinski, whatever is in the middle of that. That's what I try to be when I'm talking about politics, for that exact reason, the nuance and also understanding why popular messaging, like Obama used populist messaging very often, and actually left a lot of people disappointed as a result about money and politics and a few different things. So
yeah, I don't know what else to do besides like try to really like, not tepidly, I mean like really harshly challenge those like really bad ideas. Because I feel like if you can get people, like I feel like when you get wrapped up in like ideological capture or like political tribalism, you end up adopting very similar positions. Like the conversation I had with Vadim a couple days ago, I thought was like a really good example of like everything he said I was already familiar with, because I've seen like 1,000 people make those same sort of like statements or claims or whatever. So there's kind of like a group think, right? And so if you're not careful, if you don't really critically engage like everything basically, not to the point where you're like fucking RFK Jr., right? Like not like insanely skeptical to the point where you're not open to, you become rigid. Like you become just as dogmatic in a different kind of way, but like if you don't critically engage with these things, these narratives that kind of get passed around in lefty media spaces, you can find yourself advocating for these things that are just like fucking ludicrous. If you just spent like 2 minutes gaming it out, like it sounds great. Like use your big dick, use that bully pulpit, send in Merrick Garland, fucking just strong arm Manchin to just do everything. I guess sign off on everything you want. That sounds appealing, you know, like that's if you want change to happen very fast, you're like, yeah, you know, like get in there, cause hell, whatever. But if you game it out for literally just like 2 minutes of like, all right, well, like, what does that actually look like? Like when I imagine that process playing out step by step, it unravels so quickly. And so if you're not careful, you can find yourself advocating for just absurd solutions to very real problems.
Wait, someone in your chat said, sorry.
Oh, go ahead.
I was going to yell at someone in your chat. But Ezra Klein is literally in favor of single-payer healthcare and doesn't want to campaign on abundance. Okay, well, there's a difference between a populist who wants single-payer healthcare and a policy wonk who wants a single-payer healthcare. So if you look at politics and policy, those are completely different realms. Okay, politics and political messaging can open up policy windows, which are times when you could pass policies because you get consent from the public and they become popular. So we saw this with like the opioid epidemic. The policy window for the opioid epidemic opened up in the mid 2010s, and then we started talking about actual policies we could do because I wrote my thesis on that, so I bring it up all the time. But yeah, so the politics is different. The convincing part is different from the actual policy window and policy making process. So Ezra Klein might say he wants single payer healthcare or some other universal system like that. But the thing I'm talking about purely is messaging, because political propaganda and counter messaging is 99% of the issue, and pure political power, and the ability. And this is another thing with like AOC. When you're dealing with Trump, who is 100% a fascist, you need a movement that is going to be in the streets protesting, because Trump tried seizing voting machines with the DOJ in 2020. They said no. They will say yes this time. We need people there to protest. We need people there to work the polls. We need people there who are going to be encouraged. So I understand that Ezra Klein might seem similar, and I mean the policy can be the same on paper, and I'm not in favor of necessarily single-payer healthcare for all these for a few different reasons. But like we need to be able to approach the nuance of the current times. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt.
Would you say like, so for Medicare for all who want it, would that be technically multi-payer then? Like, how would you describe that instead of,
Yeah, so you can have a system like everyone's on Medicare, and you could even say like you're on Medicare in Australia. Let's say you get like a job, or if you buy into private insurance. In some countries, there's a rebate program, so you just get a rebate back from the government to pay for private, but you still pay taxes into the universal system. Or you'll have Medicare and have like a Medicare Advantage type thing, where you have Medicare plus you could buy on to Medicare to get other perks and benefits, and then it would be a multi-payer system. The one where it's like not Medicare for all who want it, that may be that might be a little bit less than what I'd want, because I'd want it to be universal regardless. So Medicare for all who want it is you have the option to buy into the government plan, and if you have a good government plan, it'll outcompete the private plans. I would say everyone should automatically be on the plan, but then you can opt out, get rebates, or you can buy plans on top of the government plan. Is what I'd probably want in America. A little bit more expensive, than what Pete would want.
that was another kind of like cultural marker for progressives, was like, how far are you willing to go with your single payer? And so like the snake emojis for Elizabeth Warren, and the going after Pete Buttigieg as though he was like just as bad as like Trump or something. If you didn't go as far as saying private insurance should be abolished, it should just be a universal package, everybody gets the same healthcare, you were considered, it was considered what do you call it, sacrosanct, or it was considered like a betrayal. It was considered like you weren't radical enough. And like I remember that being like a part of the discourse in 2020. It was like nobody's willing to do what needs to be done except for Bernie.
Guilty.
And I remember being kind of caught up in that a little bit, like feeling like, yeah, you fuck insurance, yeah. And then it's just like, then I was like, okay, wait a second. How does like everybody else do this? All these countries that do healthcare, like how do they actually do it? And then you find out that like none of them have banned private insurance. This is just the way that it's done in basically all developed nations. There's this option for supplemental insurance, and it's like, well, and it just made you question things. But yeah, I
had a debate versus an Andrew Yang supporter. It was about UBI versus M4A, and Andrew Yang was not a full M4A supporter, therefore he was evil. That was my perspective at the time, really bad. And I'm embarrassed to say this too. I hate saying this publicly, but the creator I found that made me turn into more of a liberal. I hate announcing this. It was at the time I was really angry after 2016, 2020.
Hold on, let me guess. That turned you into a more of a liberal as opposed to like a progressive?
Yeah, so I was like a Bernie or bust kind of guy, okay? And I found a creator
let me
that
guess.
convinced me to not be.
Let me guess. Hold on.
It's kind of out there a little bit.
Oh, that's a good. I don't know. Yeah, tell me. Let's hear it. Who was it?
It was a Vosh.
Okay. All right.
Because he was doing pro-Biden arguments against the progressive. So he was like debating people like Hassan and saying we need to vote for Biden for these reasons. So people like Vosh are actually really good for this kind of thing.
Yeah, he was talking about, I think, like anarcho-Bidenism was his thing.
Exactly.
Like
that was really effective. That was really effective. And maybe Vosh can do that more uniquely than we can even. So I don't know. Crazy times.
He's always been a bit more practical, I think, than a lot of the other. I mean, he's kind of out there for a couple reasons, but yeah, he's always struck me as, at the end of the day, like I think he understood the stakes and the value of like taking electoralism seriously. So yeah.
Okay, I have one question before we get off here. I do want your perspective from like a sick, ill gamer, a true gamer. Okay. Dealing with issues like the culture forming around like an Asmongold, the numbers he's getting, like being a top 10 search person in the world, is so crazy. And I'm like, these are all probably 12-year-old, 14-year-old, 15, 16, 17-year-old kids. I'm like, I know this has always been in gaming spaces. I don't even know if it's necessarily gaming focused, but do you have any, like Hassan's hard, but I feel like, do you think Asmongold is harder to combat propaganda wise than Hassan, or do you think they're equally like equally bad?
No, I think Asmongold's harder for sure. Just because, so like,
Okay.
first of all, just because of the numbers, I think Asmon consistently gets more traffic than Hassan. But I think Asmon, like, I think he is a really effective, like, what's the word I'm looking for? He's really kind of like dialed into that sort of anti woke culture,
Hmm.
and I think he's just proven to be very very effective at sort of reinforcing those ideas. And it's almost like Batman v Superman. What was the fucking Doomsday? Is that what it's called? Who's the fucking villain in Batman? Where it's like the harder you fight them, the bigger they get. I think it was called Doomsday. Chat. What the fuck is the name of that character? Anyways, the premise of the character was literally like if you punched him really hard, like wherever you punched him would get more reinforced. He literally got bigger and stronger with the more damage you did to him. And I feel like that's how like Asmon is. So even though I find so many of the clips that I see of him to be just pretty much just like garbage, um, if you like attack him, it seems to like help him out. And so just practically, I'm like, I just choose not to. It's not that I'm afraid of like going after big creators. It's like you don't want to inadvertently like help someone or make them bigger by sort of playing it, because part of their whole shtick is like, oh, did I fucking trigger you, bro? Are you fucking triggered? And it's like, I won. Like if you act upset and outraged about every single thing, every single provocative thing that comes out of their mouth, it's kind of like Tim Pool in that way. Like Tim Pool is just a fucking troll at this point, you know. Like the whole goal is to get you to be like, this is outrageous, and in their minds they win, and in their audience's minds they win too. So like, I don't really know how to like. We would have to like blue pill uh Asmon. We would have to like get him to genuinely be curious about like progressive liberal policies and that kind of thing. I don't know if you can like engage in the arena and do a lot of damage to him. So
Yeah, no, he's a gamer
uh,
too. So I mean, people, I've seen his gaming videos. Like my friend is a big World of Warcraft person too. So like they could just siphon people in there to hear this propaganda. Like they're playing Call of Duty, and it's like I got a hit alert. I got a hit alert. I got hit. There's an alert. Hitler. Oh, Hitler's actually a pretty good guy. Like it's kind of crazy how easy, and even like Joe Rogan saying like buying all the propaganda about like, oh well, actually World War II is a little bit more complicated than you think. And yeah, my big existential thing, seeing all of the completely just brain dead opinions is I know historically when society gets this dumb, it usually needs to be not dumb by a big crash and a big bang and something really bad happening, and I really want to avoid that historically. But the way things are going, like Americans are so disconnected from material reality that even the price shocks right now, maybe we need more time for unemployment because article just came out today, numbers from like Michigan, the highest number of people taking unemployment in 3.5 years. So maybe we just need more time for material conditions to change. But right now, it really is like you said. It's like punching someone that just laughs and they're too dumb to feel pain. Like they just don't feel anything. They don't care about being right. They actually, it's masculine now to be wrong. So if masculinity means being wrong, being weak, and being a pathetic pushover, then what are we gonna do?
yeah, and if we look at like if we look at like global instability 300 years ago was a very different concept. Like the
Yeah,
risk was
definitely.
substantial, and often, I mean, obviously, like the kinetic wars that were fought were much more bloody, and they happened with much more frequency at a much larger scale. But post-industrial revolution and post like nuclearization, the prospect of global instability takes on a whole new kind of risk that is literally existential. And so you know I don't. I would like. I share your. I would also like to avoid some kind of catastrophic collapse, because I do think that would be probably world ending with the way things are right now. So
Yeah, it's a
fucking
very
let's hope that.
awesome. I love it. And I mean on Facebook right now, I have family members liking pictures of completely noticeable AI kittens, 500,000 likes, 50,000 shares. Like
Yeah.
they're it's really turning into Wall-E, where everyone's going to be on cars, just like these little individual cars, not doing anything at all, not feeling anything. And we need a cultural and social rebuttal to MAGA. And I think that's the real area. Like that's why I got so annoyed seeing the Ezra Klein discourse and abundance, and even the discourse around Biden, because I feel like that's taking attention away from the true cultural. I use terms like fascists will use the true cultural and social decay of America, and the whole quote about like the good times create weak men. Like that is the fascist. That's always the fascist. They're always these like Michael Knowles. If anyone looks at Michael Knowles's YouTube page, he is the prettiest, most pretty man ever. These little theater kids that had to become right-wing commentators because they couldn't be successful in theater, like Ben Shapiro, Michael Knowles, Charlie Kirk, Benny Johnson. These are all, I can't say the words because I'm not a part of the LGBTQA plus community, but these are very effeminate men who are claiming the mantle of masculinity because masculinity right now is such a, to them it just means, and oh man, for them it means taking society back to a place where white men won by default, and telling white men to give up, don't work hard, don't do shit, don't clean your room like Jordan Peterson used to say, don't do shit at all, just complain about women, complain about minorities, complain about everyone else, don't do shit by yourself, be a little pathetic pushover weenie ass, and don't do anything with your entire life. Like, and I just want someone to smack them with reality in some conversation. Because Charlie Kirk was just saying that, but it's so hard when you have the headline, Democrats invest $20 million in to make a podcast that'll be friendly to white men. It's like, no, stop. Why are the focus groups like this, and why are all the people in the focus group like, they obviously never experienced the type of individuals that they'd be able to learn from. Gotta hire me, Democrats. If anyone from the DNC is watching, all right, I am hireable, and you can pay me off if you're on the right wing too. You can pay me any money, and I will switch positions, by the way.
I do have a campaign staffer that's become kind of a regular viewer, but so I'll see if I can pull some strings for you. Yeah, no, it was good talking to you. I appreciate the conversation, and let's do it again sometime. We'll definitely have you on the pod at some point.
Yeah, I really appreciate it. Yeah, happy we got to talk about a couple of these things. They are really just like strategy things, and hopefully we can marry all the, I guess I'll say effective members of the left. We really need it right now. I think you're doing good work. Old man Hutch watching us use our fascism. You're like, tone down the fascism. You could play with fascism a little bit. Play with your populism a little bit. Okay, we could use a little populism. Don't go too far, you crazy kids. All right, man. Yeah, thank you. Have a great one.
All right, take it easy. Bye bye.
Yeah.